Right, so here we are, ladies and gentlemen. I told you about the murder of a lady called Martha Tabram on Tuesday the 7th of August 1888, and I said that she'd been murdered, she'd been stabbed to death 39 times, and everyone was starting to get worried about how atrocious that particular murder was. It wasn't until the 31st of August that they had the next thing. The next murder was the murder of a lady called Mary Ann Nichols, and she was about 45 years old, and her body was sprawled out. You look across the road, you'll see there's a bicycle parked there, and very near that curb, or at least it was, there were doors there that led into a warehouse yard, and then there were a run of houses along the street. They've all been pulled down and replaced with these very modern houses. The area has changed more or less completely out of recognition. The only thing that Jack the Ripper would recognise now would be what used to be the old board school. That's where children from the district used to go to school, and because they had no playground, they had to use the roof for a playground. Anyway, the building itself was scheduled for demolition, but then some very enterprising person turned it into flats, and they've now sold very expensively to people who earn large sums of money in the financial centre of the City of London. Anyway, to come back to Mary Ann Nichols. Her body was first of all discovered by a man called Paul, actually, no, to be honest, it wasn't Paul. He gave his name, it's a bit confusing, he gave his name as Charles Cross, but he also used to use the name Lechmere. And he was walking to work sort of early in the morning, about 3:30, and he stumbled upon what he thought was a piece of tarpaulin lying in the middle of the road. So he just hesitated to see if it would be any use to him, and then he realised that it was the body of a woman. And then, before he could go very much further in his investigations, another man whose surname was Paul came up behind him, and together they looked at the body. There wasn't very much they could do because both of them had to get to work very quickly, but they smoothed it out, and they went off and they decided they would go and find a police officer to report the matter to. So they went and did that. Now, as they went off to find a police officer, another police officer, a man called John Neal, came up here, and he also discovered the body, and he realized that when he was looking at the body that the lady's throat had been cut. That's something that the other two had missed, and there was a pool of blood. So he went and summoned his friends and summoned the doctor, and they went and examined the body, and then they decided to put it onto an ambulance. And an ambulance in those days was really just a glorified wheelbarrow that you took a body to the mortuary for further investigations. Anyway, that's what they did. They put the body in the ambulance, and they took the body down to the mortuary, the local mortuary. It was only then, when they started to examine the body more closely, they realized there'd been an attack on the lower part of the body. It had been cut open, and that the intestines were protruding. So again, that caused a great deal of alarm and despondency around the neighborhood, and people realized there was some maniac who was abroad, walking around the streets late at night, attacking women, and that's really when the pandemonium started. And there was a talk about a man called the Leather Apron. People said, oh, it was the work of a man called Leather Apron. Leather Apron apparently ran a little gang of hooligans, and what they used to do would be they would jump on prostitutes and rob them of their money. So they said, well, the work was the work of a man called Leather Apron, and everyone was looking for this man known as Leather Apron. Well, leather aprons are not uncommon in this district. Many people wore leather aprons, so it wasn't very helpful. But anyway, we had the murder here on the 31st of August, and then shortly afterwards we had the murder of Annie Chapman. In fact, this murder was on the 31st of August. That was a Friday. We had the entire weekend, and then we had an entire week, and then the next murder happened on Saturday the 8th of September, and that happened in Hanbury Street, not so far from here, and that's where we're going to go now.